Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 68. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Merry Christmas Eve to all of Steelers Nation out there. Dave, we're down the chimney with a lot of information, a lot to discuss here today, getting you ready for Week 17 against the Cleveland Browns. So, Dave, how you doing?
All right, I'm doing well on this Christmas Eve. Hope everybody listening is ready for Santa to come. And yeah, we've got quite a bit to get to today. And then obviously later on in the show, going to be going over some final notes from the All-22 from the big win over the Lions on Sunday. And we'll talk about what Mike Tomlin had to say on Tuesday. And obviously probably some DK Metcalf in this one as well. So where would you like to start this morning?
Well, just to wrap a bow on sort of the news of the last 24 hours, DK Metcalf had his appeal for his 2-game suspension heard by Roger Goodell appointee last night. That was denied. The suspension is upheld, and so Metcalf will not play in Week 17 against Cleveland or Week 18 against Baltimore, eligible to return for the wild card round should Pittsburgh advance there. Pittsburgh adding some wide receiver help in his place, and also with the injury to Calvin Austin and Ben Skoranek being banged up over the last couple of weeks, signing back Brandon Johnson, who was with the team in training camp, had a good preseason, then got injured and has been on the tryout circuit throughout the season. And so that's kind of just a very quick notes view on everything. Metcalf suspended for 2 games, appeal denied. Pittsburgh adding Brandon Johnson to the practice squad in his place.
All right. We don't know what the reciprocal is to that though, right?
No.
All right. So you got a familiar face coming in there at wide receiver. DK Metcalf, due to this suspension being upheld and all, he was placed on what they call the reserve, suspended by the commissioner list yesterday afternoon. So that technically opens up one spot on the 53-man roster. We'll see if they fill that today or potentially wait till Saturday to fill that spot, or even potentially not fill it at all. We've seen this team go into a couple of games this year with 52-man rosters and all. So we'll certainly be paying attention to that. So I guess the topic of conversation at the top of the show is the DK Metcalf 2-game suspension and it not getting reduced as part of the appeal process. I believe Chris Palmer, former NFL head coach and longtime NFL coach, Chris Palmer coincidentally coached the Browns for 1 or 2 seasons, I think, there many moons ago. I think wasn't that right after the Baltimore moved to Cleveland and all like that. But kind of funny that the Steelers play the Browns this week, and you got a former Browns head coach making the decision on that. I'm not implying anything. I'm just thinking that it was quite comical once that news got released there of who actually was the assignee for Roger Goodell to hear the appeal and all. I thought there was a chance that this thing would get reduced to 1 game, but there's been several camera angles from the stands that come out about the fan that supposedly provoked and used derogatory terms towards DK and all like that. In not one of them, though, I don't believe have I heard him actually using derogatory words. However, he was quite excited that he got a reaction out of DK Metcalf and seemingly said that was the plan in one of those videos there. I did wonder last night after the word came down that the 2-game suspension was upheld. I couldn't help but wonder back a couple of games ago against the Buffalo Bills when DK used a quote unquote violent gesture or deemed violent gesture that ended up getting him fined a good, pretty decent chunk of money, kind of given the guns, I guess, if you will. I did wonder that had he not done that, been fined for that quote unquote violent gesture, and we'll never know the answer to this, would he may have only maybe gotten that reduced down to 1 game, but we'll never know. I don't believe the answer to that, but I did wonder about that. But it is now 2 games, and I guess the biggest hope right now is that neither of these next 2 games mean anything for the Steelers. And at worst, maybe the regular season finale against the Ravens doesn't mean anything.
I very much doubt that violent gesture that Metcalf was fined for had any impact on this punishment. They're 2 totally separate events. That's a point of emphasis thing versus this bizarre altercation with fan that is so next level and so uncommon to be talking about. I had little expectation that this suspension would be tamped down on appeal when it's Goodell appointing somebody, when it's Goodell handing out the initial suspension. This was not heard by the typical jointly appointed officers of Jordy Nelson or Derek Brooks or former Steeler Ramon Foster, because this was an issue that was deemed conduct detrimental to the team. So it was rising above kind of a normal situation there. We'll never know exactly what that fan said. Some of the videos, it's still hard to tell because there's no video of them that's right next to the interaction, right? It's all sort of a little further away, and you can't tell the audio super well, but there is no evidence that I'm aware of that's backing up Metcalf's claim. But no matter what that fan said, Metcalf is still in the wrong there, can't do that. And so that's the punishment he'll have to deal with.
You're right. The fact of the matter is here, he's got to show better restraint. End of story. Now, the league supposedly, I guess, there was a report last night that the Lions aren't going to take any action against that fan because they don't view it as the fan breaking any code of conduct. But there was a report this morning that the NFL is looking further into that. And I know the fan has evidently, acquired a lawyer, and we'll see if he takes any legal action that way against DK and I guess Ocho and some of these other guys that are claiming that DK said what, his account of things. That's just going to be another can of worms that'll obviously probably take a little time to filter through here overall. But the crux of it all is that DK's just got to show bigger restraint there. Now, 2-game suspension is a pretty hefty suspension, and the timeliness obviously of it isn't great. You haven't yet clinched the AFC North. Now, hopefully, by the time the Steelers take the field on Sunday against the Browns, that's the case here. So, I don't know what else to add as far as that actual the suspension and it being upheld and the appeal and the league looking into the fan code of conduct and all like that. I suppose we could kind of move into the other report, and we kind of hit on this the other night during the live stream about the guarantees and all in DK Metcalf's contract.
Yeah, I know there was some question about would they void, how does that process work? But because of the suspension, because it was conduct detrimental to the team, the guarantees in Metcalf's contract do automatically by default void. And that to me is maybe just as weighty for him as missing these 2 games, even though, of course, he'd probably void those guarantees to go out there and play these next 2 games. And that's really interesting. And it doesn't have to mean that, they're going to cut DK Metcalf. Report came out, Pittsburgh is reaffirming their relationship with DK Metcalf. They're going to roll into 2026. But I think the injury guarantee, the loss of that's going to be interesting for his own, personal protection. So you can speak to that situation better than I can when it comes to the financials. But The point is, this will cost him beyond just these 2 games he will be suspended for.
Well, it cost him as far as protection, right? And I wrote a pretty lengthy Twitter post about this the other day. For starters, DK, the 2026 base salary that he's scheduled to make is $25 million, and that was the only remaining fully guaranteed portion of his contract. His 2027 base salary of $20 million was guaranteed for injury only. So, assuming that his the language and all in there, which I think Mike Florio and Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports both report about this, is that yes, his actions are deemed conduct detrimental to the team, and which automatically voids any future guarantees of any shape or size, I guess. So yes. People have been asking, does this mean that the Steelers can cut DK Metcalf now? Will they cut DK Metcalf now? So I went on to write, yes, the Steelers could actually cut him now or after the season and no longer be on the hook for that $25 million in 2026 and any future money beyond that, obviously. However, cutting Metcalf before June the 1st, 2026 would result in a dead money charge of $24 million in 2026. Now, what that $24 million is the remaining proration of the signing bonus that DK Metcalf was given. I believe that was $30 million, or a little less than that if the Steelers really wanted to go after the 2-game proration of the entire $30 million signing bonus. Going that route would not offer, obviously, much in the way of salary cap relief for the Steelers if you're going to cut him before June 1st next season, and you got $25 million in cash you would obviously save, but as far as cap savings and all that proration escalating of $24 million or give or take that, depending on if they went after the portion of the signing bonus, you don't get a lot of relief that way. Even cutting Metcalf after June 1st next year would result in $6 million in dead money in 2026. Once again, a little less, so they really wanted to go after the 2 games of proration of the signing bonus. Additionally, there would be an $18 million dead money charge in 2027 for him being cut after June 1st in 2026. In reality, it's funny how people don't read all. I should put that too long, didn't read or whatever. In reality, the Steelers aren't likely to cut Metcalf because of this recent incident. After the 2020 season, however, Metcalf is at risk of getting cut if his play declines or he continues to be an issue for the team. Metcalf is due a $6.5 million roster bonus, and that's not guaranteed, in March of 2027. And realistically, even moving past this incident and all now, that is the next kind of line in the sand when it even becomes partially feasible for him being cut. Now, cutting or trading Metcalf after the 2020 season and before his March 2027 roster bonus is due, however, would still result in a dead money charge of $18 million for that 2020 season. So that's the mumbo jumbo all related to it. And then obviously last night there was the report that, regardless of the guarantees being void and all like that, the Steelers, have affirmed their belief in DK Metcalf and have no plans to move on from him, yada, yada, yada. So as things stand right now, he's, it sounds almost certain that he's going to earn his $25 million in 2026. And it's really, barring this guy, the biggest aspect of all of this would seem to be that DK Metcalf no longer has himself protected from a serious injury for 2027. should one occur to him. That appears to be
Mhm.
the biggest fallout from all of this.
Right, and that's the point that I made, and I don't think we're talking about enough because the Steelers are not cutting DK Metcalf this offseason. It's just not going to happen. So that, while in theory could hurt him, just in reality is not going to happen. But the guarantee, as I understand it, from injury, and usually that's one of those sort of agent-driven, fluffed up numbers. When a deal gets reported, there's X amount guaranteed. Then you see the actual language of the contract and realize the true guarantee, the fully guaranteed, is some fraction of that, usually about half, with the injury guarantee representing the other half. My understanding, I think this was some Jonathan Jones said, that if Metcalf were to get hurt, suffer a severe injury in 2026, in which he could not play in 2027, could not pass a physical, he would be guaranteed $20 million. Now, that has gone away because of the void of that injury guarantee. And to me, that is the most notable thing he has lost here, is that protection against a serious injury, which you hope never happens. Probably won't happen, but has a greater chance to happen than him getting cut this offseason by Pittsburgh. And so that's the real thing he loses out on here.
Right. Because once again, even if with the fully with the 25 million next year now not being guaranteed, you still have the cap repercussions. He would literally
And he doesn't lose that money, to be clear, but just because that money guaranteed for next year is gone, he can still earn that normally, correct?
right. The money doesn't go away. It just the fact that it's fully guaranteed should the team decide to move on from him or trade him for whatever. Well, if they traded him, obviously a team would assume that 25 million. So basically all he loses is the fact that the Steelers wanted to cut him outright. That money's no longer guaranteed, and the chances of that happening, other than him just pulling an AB or something and just totally going off the rails here, that's just not going to happen. So it's not like the money gets decreased. It's just the term of it being fully guaranteed goes away. And once again,
Right.
you would just, as I laid out, cutting him would or trading him would result in $24 million dead money charge if done so before June the 1st next year.
Right. So a lot of that to me is academic, but the injury guarantee is the part that he really is literally and potentially figuratively hurt by.
It sounds, and the reason this has become such a big story is the fact that it sounds so catastrophic when you say his actions voided his guarantees. Period. That different people hear that and make different assumptions related to that. But the biggest aspect of all this is he has no longer protected himself from sustaining a serious injury in 2026 that prevents him from playing football at this point because he has now lost the protection of the fully guaranteed. Now, there are other, if there's other benefits and all like that. Obviously, none of them equate to, I don't think 20 million and all like that. But once again, the biggest aspect of this is that he has now voided his injury guarantee for 2027.
What if he were to suffer a severe injury at the end of this season in the playoff round? Would he have an injury guarantee for 26, or was that not a thing because that money was supposed to be fully guaranteed?
I mean, fully guaranteed, I think, does include skill cap, injury, and all, all like that. So if he were to, and I think that, in other words, I think that would impact. Well, I mean, he's suspended for the last two games, so that's not going to
Sure,
affect
but
his.
playoffs, so he gets hurt in the playoff game.
It to me, it would impact the 2027.
So what would his pay be in 2026?
Well, I suppose if he sustained a serious injury on the field in the playoffs and was unable to play in 2026, they could technically, I guess, cut him with a failed physical, and he wouldn't get anything.
Right, because the guarantees that were there are now void. So just
Mhm.
also probably worth noting. Hopefully none of this comes to pass and even becomes relevant, but it is something very much that is in every big money contract. Injury guarantees. It's rarely discussed. It's rarely exercised. It's often only mentioned as part of that larger group of overall guaranteed money that agents will tout to make that deal look a little bit better than it often is for their client. But it is now a very real situation for DK Metcalf.
Yeah, it is, and I think when you and here's the thing too, if he goes into the offseason and obviously were to get injured by his own volition, not team related, that obviously, would hurt him on top of everything else there. But the fact that he has voided his on the field injury protection is in my opinion the biggest thing here. Now, once again, it there is a layer that's that cost him here, and once again, look, the Steelers are not going to move away from him this offseason, so that's the first thing that we need to get out there. And he's not going to lose any of the $25 million he's scheduled to earn in 2026, and that's the long and short of it. I would imagine he's going to try to do a better job of walking the straight and narrow moving forward here. So I think that's all there is really to say. Now, the other aspect, I guess, about this is he's losing his final 2 game checks, which is, I think, a little over $500,000. The Steelers will save that in cash because they don't have to pay him those game checks, and they'll also get rebated that same amount against the cap this year for him missing those games.
Right. So they'll be without him. They'll look to try to have other guys step up. Mike Tomlin mentioning Roman Wilson specifically, and then also, of course, was asked about DK Metcalf. This occurred before the appeal, before the denial of said appeal. And so Tomlin was careful in his language, but he did say, quote, "I certainly don't condone the behavior, but I support DK, and I really don't have a lot to add other than what I just told you," and talked about there still a potential legal ramifications. And that, again, this was before the hearing. Tomlin wasn't entirely sure of the team's security protocol and what rules were in place that were supposed to prevent Metcalf from walking over to have this altercation with the fan. Tomlin touted the security group that Pittsburgh has, but was unsure of the particular protocol.
Should you that's the other aspect is that, and especially guys like Mike Florio like to go in and break down and all like that. Should teams, have a protocol in place that makes sure players don't go over there, or get in the middle of,
It's a big sideline, so I don't know how you try to police the entire group there because there's a lot of space to work with, but I think you certainly reevaluate your own protocol. And even if you're one of the other teams, you look at your protocol and say, we just saw this happen around the NFL. How do we make sure this will not happen to us? And so I don't know what the answers are, but I think certainly you reevaluate.
Yeah, and obviously from a coaching aspect, you just make sure these guys know you guys just can't just don't go over there.
Tomlin continuing, though, later in the presser to support DK Metcalf, was asked about how his experience with Metcalf has been this year. Tomlin says, quote, "He's been great. He cares. He works hard. He's a heck of a guy. He's a good teammate, and that's why he's so easy to support," end quote. I think, again, Metcalf is a solid dude. I think he made a really poor choice. I'm sure he regrets it very much, but I don't cast a negative light on Metcalf in any different way, him overall after this than I did before this.
Do you think Metcalf at all would have helped his cause any if right after the game he talked to the media and told his side of the story of what happened?
No, I don't think it really mattered what he said. I don't think it really mattered what the fan said. You can't go over there. You can't put your hands on a fan. The NFL was going to hand down a swift and clear and harsh punishment to send that message to not just Metcalf, but the entire NFL that this is not going to be something we tolerate. So I think there really was nothing Metcalf could do other than just not doing this stuff in the first place.
All right. And And after the dust is settled here, once again, they won't have him for the final 2 games. And they got a little bit of a banged up wide receiver group now. And we'll have to see how this transpires the rest of the way. Calvin Austin dealing with a hamstring injury coming out of this game against the Lions. Ben Skoranek, I think, was still kind of wearing something protective on that messed up hand of his this past Sunday. You obviously have Adam Thielen in the room now. Marquez Valdez-Scantling in the room now. It'll be it, and they signed Brandon Johnson back to the practice squad evidently this morning here. Will they have enough bodies to to take care of business, and will they have to elevate one of the practice squad guys on Saturday? So that's I think Calvin Austin III is the one that we'll really be watching this next week. But as a byproduct of all this, we should see Roman Wilson back in a helmet for these final 2 games.
And Mike Tomlin mentioning Wilson specifically as somebody he's excited to see dress again and have an opportunity after sitting and being made inactive the last couple of games. So what that role will be, we'll see. A lot of receivers in that room. Of course, tight ends, running backs, Kenneth Gainwell, very much involved in the passing game. So it's a full team effort here. Has been the entire season, but Wilson should get a chance.
After this calms down a little bit more with this whole Metcalf thing here, I'm going to try to maybe see if we can get Joel Corey on the show to maybe walk us through some particulars related to these voids and maybe try to reaffirm or correct us as far as some of the own questions that we've asked in the last 15 minutes about this.
All right. Sounds good. Looking forward to that conversation. Switching gears here for a moment, Dave. Some other news of yesterday, the NFL announcing the Pro Bowl selections for the 2026 Pro Bowl games that will take place in California. Pittsburgh has 3 selections this year, those being TJ Watt, Jalen Ramsey, and Ben Skoranek. For Watt and Ramsey, their 8th Pro Bowls, respectively. For Skoranek, his first. Of course, making that as a specialist, not as a receiver, but that specialist coverage guy category. So kudos to him after a pretty big public online push to make the Pro Bowl, was the top fan vote getter, and then also part of that final actual Pro Bowl roster. So Watt, was that really deserved? Probably not, but the name value certainly will play a role. It wasn't the fans. The fans did not vote DJ Watt incredibly highly, I don't believe. So this was the other portion of the selection process, and then Ramsey making that transition from corner to safety probably helped him get that Pro Bowl nod.
I still think Watt on the AFC side finished in the fan side of the voting. What was it? Third,
Is it 5th?
second in the AFC.
Oh, it was second. Okay, he must have gone up higher than I thought at the end. Fair, but that's still only what, 1/3 or some fraction of the overall tally in determining who makes the Pro Bowl. So some other players and the other voters played a role too in getting Watt there.
Ben Skoranek finished first in the AFC and really first overall in all special teams voting. TJ Watt finished third in the outside linebacker category overall in fan voting, second in the AFC. Connor Hayward finished 6th overall for the fullback position, 4th in the AFC, and Jalen Ramsey finished 8th overall and 4th in the AFC there. Look, you got guys. Joe Alt made the Pro Bowl, right? Pro Bowl games, and he's been out since what, week 6 or something like that.
He played about 6 games this year.
So this is obviously a popularity contest. Could you make a good argument that guys like maybe Zach Frazier and Cameron Hayward, got the snub? Yeah, I think you could. I will say this: Ben Skoranek was deserving of a Pro Bowl. He has 20 total tackles on special teams, 10 solos, and 10 assists. Right now at this point of the season when it comes to special teams work.
I love it. Yeah, he's been a demon and playing with one good hand the last couple of weeks too, and still making plays, which I think embodies the life of a special teamer.
Should they put bump? Well, we had this guy, and look, the Pro Bowl isn't even really the Pro Bowl. Watt's probably not even going to show up for this again, right? But should they put bumpers in there, buffers, I guess. You gotta play an X amount of
Mhm.
games, and uh, that's still not gonna curtail the fan voting side of it. But the fact that it's just all a dog and pony show. You know.
Yeah, it doesn't have maybe the meaning that the All-Pro votes do in terms of who truly deserves it, but it still very much matters for resumes and contracts and Hall of Fame considerations. So it still certainly, I think, means a lot, which I think should require some sort of higher scrutiny to it, where I don't know exactly what that looks like. As you said, some bumpers or buffers to it, probably a games played requirement is where you start with this thing. So the guys that haven't missed a bunch of time, they aren't included in Pro Bowl selections. But yeah, there's probably going to be some revisiting of it. I don't want to take away the fan vote entirely, but there's probably got to be some more requirements to who's eligible.
All right, and I believe Connor Hayward, it came out, his agency reported that he's been named I guess a first or second alternate. I don't know how all that works, and all that never goes public unless either the team, the player, or the agent release the info as far as alternate, what number alternate those guys are.
Yeah, we don't know if Pittsburgh has any others. Maybe they do, but the Steelers never announce alternate selections. They always just announce those that make the actual roster. And again, those are Watt, Ramsey, and Skronik, of course.
All right.
All right, Dave, where to from here? Mike Tomlin speaking to the media on Tuesday, giving a health update of this team, giving some optimistic notes on the likes of Nick Herbig when it comes to TJ Watt. Tomlin saying there was no update, but did say that, there was kind of a component of this that's getting Watt just ready back to be in football shape more so than him recovering from the surgery on his partially collapsed lung, and then also indicated that he expects Watt to be speaking with the media later this week. Typically, he speaks on Fridays, and so I imagine that will hold true this week, and by then we'll have a good idea of his status for this Browns game. So that is certainly a notable step in one direction.
Yeah, and I believe he was asked, is it safe to, in so many words, is it safe to assume that he's over the actual, you know, I guess the recovery of the collapsed lung or partially collapsed lung, and is it more a conditioning aspect? And I think Thomas said, "Yeah, I suppose you could say that's fair," but he went to say, "I'm not a medical specialist, and I'll let TJ talk on that." So we'll just have to wait and see. At its core, here, are we likely to see TJ Watt play on Sunday against the Browns? Probably not, especially if the game ends up not holding any significance should the Ravens lose or tie the Green Bay Packers on Saturday there. But I got a feeling that we're not going to see TJ Watt regardless of the Ravens game outcome on Sunday against the Browns. And obviously, if the game against the Ravens doesn't mean anything, you're probably not going to see him in that one. The best case scenario is that neither of these last two games wind up meaning anything. TJ Watt can continue to get himself in football shape and be fresh as fresh can possibly be. Assuming this team gets in the playoffs and to play their first playoff game.
Tomlin noting James Pierre had a workout Tuesday morning, so he's making some progress, but status still unclear. Tomlin noted Pierre be limited early in the week. Malu, no update on his triceps injury that held him out last week. Again, Herbig, Tomlin said looking optimistic in terms of him being available, but still limited early in the week. Brandon Eccles, who had that first half groin injury, don't know his status there. Same with Calvin Austin, his hamstring injury against Detroit. Noted that Spencer Anderson, Jalen Warren likely limited early in the week with some bumps and bruises, but they are expected to play.
How crazy would it be if we wind up looking back at these late season suspension and kind of, obviously the truly unfortunate, and look, the Watt thing obviously goes way beyond football and all, because you're worried about your livelihood and your family and all like that. But how crazy would it end up being if we're looking back, and maybe even as quick as Saturday night, that you ended up getting guys like Watt, Metcalf, Sayamalu, Calvin Austin III, a couple of these other dinged up guys kind of rested in these last two games, despite being the number 4 seed in the
Mhm.
AFC, and then thus, you know, no team's completely healthy at, even entering the season, let alone coming out of the season. But, you get some prime players like Watt, Metcalf, and a couple of those others that I noted rested going into the playoffs and not even owning the number 1 seed. That would be quite maybe a storyline to look back at in itself should the Steelers get into the playoffs and then, make any kind of a run.
Sure, I don't know the last time Pittsburgh had their last 2 games mean nothing. Now, that only happens if the Ravens lose or tie on Saturday night, but should that happen and Pittsburgh's Week 17, Week 18 games effectively mean nothing, I don't know the last occurrence of that, and there's still a chance that Pittsburgh could be the first AFC team to clinch their division, which is a thought that blows your mind considering how back in the pack Pittsburgh was comparatively and fighting for the division, and many expected Baltimore to take it even midseason. Now, Denver plays ahead of Pittsburgh, I believe, on Thursday, and if Denver wins, they will, I believe, clinch the AFC West. But if they are somehow upset by former Steeler Chris Oladokun and the Chiefs, then the Steelers could be the first to clinch if the Ravens lose or tie on Saturday night, which is, I think, another crazy twist to this playoff race.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think while we're talking about scenarios real quick, the Steelers at this point obviously still have a 1 point whatever chance there is at the number 3 seed. However, that could go away as quick as Saturday if the Texans beat the Chargers in their game. That would close up any believe possibility that the Steelers could get the 3 seed. So at that point, they would be locked into 4th seed or nothing. And the clinching scenario official came out from the NFL. We already went on over this the other day, especially on the live stream there. A Baltimore loss or tie to Green Bay gives the Steelers the AFC North, and if the Ravens beat the Packers, then the Steelers need either a win or a tie against the Browns on Sunday to secure the AFC North. Being at that there, and this plays into the next kind of topic, I guess, that Mike Tomlin talked about. Even if there is a minor chance, let's say the Ravens lose or tie to the Packers on Saturday, and let's say that the Chargers beat the Texans on Saturday, and there still remains that minute shot, as likely as it is to happen, for the number 3 seed. Do you worry about that at all? And thus, does that impact how you may or may not approach this game on Sunday against the Browns from a personnel standpoint?
Excuse me, still fighting the cough a little bit. No, that does not change my calculation at all. I'm not going to chase that 2-3% chance of capturing the 3 seed. I would act as if I can only get the 4 seed. Everything is locked up and act accordingly.
All right. So, and then once again, as we talked kind of the other night, and I think coming out of the Monday show and all like that, this team has no choice right now on Wednesday today of preparing for the Browns like they must win this game.
Yes,
So,
they're going to act all week like they have to win this game. Their entire practice week will be reflective of that.
all right, Mike Tomlin was asked on Tuesday, blah blah blah. Should this game technically become meaningless? Would that impact how your personnel usage? And he said it could, but he hasn't thought that far ahead. And he said, to be quite honest with you, I just learned that the Ravens game is Saturday. They all know when that game is, but regardless, uh, they're not going to find out the outcome of the Ravens-Packers game until late Saturday night. So at that point, then you could potentially pivot. But here's the other side of it too. You still got to suit up X amount of players. It's not like you can rest every guy that you technically want to rest. You still got to be able to field enough guys out there to play the game and play special teams and all like that. Now, would it potentially put you in a situation where you might decide to make Aaron Rodgers the emergency third quarterback and start Mason Rudolph and potentially get Will Howard in the game late? That's all something that we'll have to do, that everybody will just have to worry about depending on what happens Saturday night. But you cannot, on this Wednesday, you have to go in with the intentions through the entire practice week of we have to play to win the game on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns.
Which makes it harder to play your real young backups even if there's nothing to play for in that game on Sunday, because they just simply did not get the practice reps to be in position to play, and that's still just not fair to the player. And so that's a consideration to be made. Now, if there's nothing to play for, if the Ravens lose or tie to Green Bay, then yes, how you handle that, injured players, you err on the side of caution in terms of not playing them. Your star players are going to either not play or get very little work in, and then certainly would not play in Week 18. So your Rodgers, your Cam Haywards, your say Malu if he's cleared to play, etc. Those guys would qualify, but you're not going to have the entire starting offense and defense benched for, like you said, logistical reasons. You don't have college rosters. You don't have enough people to bench every single true and blue starter. And then also just from the standpoint of those backups, the Sebastian Castros of the world have not gotten the reps to justify giving those guys a bunch of snaps in this game.
All right, my mind could not help but race, though, to think that should the Ravens lose or tie the Packers on Saturday, of Mason Rudolph just starting and being chased by Myles Garrett for the sack record. And if we get to such an occurrence, I couldn't help from a comical standpoint to think every time Myles Garrett is in the game, you run the football right at him. And then every time Myles Garrett's off the field is when you pass.
Yeah, it's a storyline because Rudolph certainly will be playing if there's nothing to play for.
Right. So anyway, we'll worry about that. And obviously by the time the Friday show rolls around, we're not going to have the answer to what the Ravens do. So it will be interesting. That's obviously one byproduct of what could potentially happen depending on the outcome of the Packers-Ravens game.
Mike Tomlin talking
I entertain myself with all these thoughts that rush through my head. So I just like to make them public at times.
It's a busy place to be in Dave's head, and so he's sharing the little bit that he can. Tomlin talking up the Steelers linebackers on Jack Sawyer, saying that he, quote, continues to prove that he belongs, and also praising Patrick Queen, especially as a defensive communicator, green dot wearer, having that responsibility and growing into it after a bumpy first year in Pittsburgh.
I would like to take this moment to take issue with what you decided on being the hidden play of the game too. And look, I understand why you chose the play that you chose with Cam Hayward there, but man, that play that Patrick Queen made with 40-something seconds left of the game to save the touchdown. What a play! What an effort on that. I believe that should have been the hidden play of the game.
All right, well, I'll send this to Roger Goodell. He will appoint somebody to hear it, and we'll see where it goes from there. I thought Mike Tomlin had a very good edition of hidden plays. He talked about, before the Kenneth Gainwell touchdown, some really key third down conversions and third and longs that Pittsburgh picked up. One to Pat Frymuth, a check down that he was left open on, sort of leaked out after chipping, and then moved the chains, and Adam Thielen with a third down conversion a couple of plays later there. So those are big 3rd and 10-plus conversions that typically offenses don't convert, that allowed you the opportunity to be in position to throw that deep ball up to Kenneth Gainwell. So I thought Tomlin had a good version to open his presser on Tuesday.
Look, you could make several arguments for a couple other plays as well, too. The Scotty Miller catch over the middle of the field. And what about the DK Metcalf back shoulder catch on a 1st and 20 to move the chains on the very next play? You get the touchdown, another long touchdown by Jaylen Warren. So
sure,
that was, the back shoulder to DK Metcalf was such an impactful play as well too. So yeah, I'm just having fun with you. You
No,
know
I know.
that.
Yeah, and the Hayward play, like, I don't know how he saw the ball in that one. That's
Mhm.
just old man Hayward just sniffing that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, another impactful play too was the safety with Cam Hayward. And everybody wants to point to Duggar, and obviously Duggar coming off the edge and weaving through traffic to get golf down on that safety and all. But Cam Hayward occupies three players on that play.
Yeah, the tackle, the guard, and the running back, and Duggar looped in free and had the sack on Goff. I thought Tomlin also made a really good juxtaposition between when the Steelers were backed up after that 4th and goal stop early in the first quarter, and in the first quarter, I should say, they were able to move the ball, get a first down, get some field position, and punt. When Detroit was backed up after the Darnell Washington fumble, they turned the ball over in a safety. And so Pittsburgh's offense did a much better job in that backed up moment than what Detroit did, and that was a real deciding factor.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And the couple of plays that happened, I think one went to Thielen out to the side when the Steelers were deep in their own end, and they were able to at least work out of a more dangerous territory at that point of the game.
Yeah, you had a smoke to Thielen against free access, and then the big third down catch. The only catch that Calvin Austin had, but it was a big one on third down to move the sticks, which, again, Pittsburgh, did they get more first downs after that? I forget exactly. They didn't score that drive, but they were able to play from some field position and punt, which was big when facing a potent Detroit offense, because if you're punting on your own 2-yard line, you're giving them the ball to, let's say, in your territory, wherever that may be. That's basically points right on the board for Detroit.
All right. A lot of praise. Let's see. He talked more about Jack Sawyer, and I thought Jack Sawyer had a pretty good game overall in this one. First start for him with both T.J. Watt and Nick Herbig sidelined for this game. Let's see. We already hit on what he said about T.J. Watt. Talked about Patrick Queen. We hit on that. What about? He was asked about will Dylan Cook get help with Myles Garrett?
It was funny. You could see Tomlin smile mid-question because, as he immediately said, everybody gets help. He was watching the 49ers tape and watching Trent Williams, legendary Hall of Fame, first ballot left tackle, get help. So, yes, Dylan Cook will get plenty of help.
All right. He was also talked about Kenneth Gainwell and the progression and development of him, and he harkened back to what he said several times, I think, since throughout the season about how impactful they thought Gainwell was against them as a member of the Eagles last season, and how he helped on special teams and the significant plays that he made, that he produced 17 points, and how he was in the shadow of Saquon Barkley for obvious reasons there in Philadelphia. And we've done a lot of praising of Kenneth Gainwell over the last several weeks, and what a great signing that was there. So that all checks out there. Mike Tomlin was asked about the OPI, the several pivotal OPI calls in this game against the Lions, and he went on to say that sometimes officiating crews have personalities like units and teams. Goes on to say that the team scouts officiating crews in a similar way. And, he noted that crew on Sunday called the second most penalties per game of all crews in the NFL. So they went into the game with that understanding that they needed to play clean and yada, yada. So, yeah, the just of that is that, they obviously scout referee crews throughout the season, and it just goes to kind of a tag on about that. John Hussey's crew will be calling the Sunday game against the Browns, and this is the same crew that called the game in Week 12, I believe, against the Bears. And wasn't that the game that Joey Porter Jr. had a couple of penalties on him?
I believe it was. I'd have to think back, but we always scout the refs too. I know we have the article up on it already, so I'd have to check that post to see what rate they're calling DPI and holding calls, defensive holding calls this year, but certainly will be something to look at.
All right. He sung the praises of Ben Skoranek and his Pro Bowl designation. We don't need to go much further into that. And I thought the other interesting comment, well, two of them really, about Derek Harmon and Spencer Anderson. Why don't you recap what he said about Derek Harmon?
Yeah, just kinda I was a little nod to, I'm not sure exactly what the specific reference was, but the narrative about Harmon
It
being good
was him.
against the
It
run,
was
which
him reading Steelers Depot.
because I know there's been a lot of stats about, Harmon run defense whenever he's out there versus when he's not. I think it's kind of what Tomlin was alluding to and sort of saying, yeah, maybe that narrative is true. Sort of said that maybe tongue in cheek, but also Harmon's great against the run. And whenever he gets out there, Pittsburgh plays an amazing performance against a potent Lions rushing attack to hold them to 15 yards. And so Pittsburgh's run defense had been hemorrhaging without him, even versus Miami. It wasn't the numbers were fine, but Miami just couldn't run the ball in the second half in that game because of game script, and so that's why the run defense looked better than it probably was. Achane still had 5 yards of pop and a couple of good runs, and that one Harmon steps on the field, and the Lions' run defense goes up in smoke.
All right. What did you think about Harmon's play on Sunday?
Yeah, it was good, and Ross McCorkle, like I said, either on the Monday pod or the Monday live stream, has had a fun time going through the tape of this one. Some really good wins against not just anybody, but Penei Sewell, top right tackle in the NFL. And so I think Harmon really had a statement game in this one.
All right. It was good to see him back after missing all those games with a knee, and hopefully he can stay healthy moving forward here and continue development. The other interesting fact was Mike Tomlin asked about the value of Spencer Anderson and all the different things that he can do, and he says, "Man, I can't say enough about his versatility and his intellect. He did that at Maryland. He played every position other than left tackle at Maryland. That was a component of us really liking his profile." He says, "You got to value versatility when you're picking later in the draft," and he certainly displayed that. But I don't want to have him in a box either. We believe he's a guy that has starter capabilities and the potential for that in his future as well. But certainly in the short term, he's been an asset to us with all things he's able that he's able to do today. That's
Yeah, that
quite
future comment really caught my
yeah.
attention, Dave.
Yeah, that really caught mine as well too. And look, we'll have to see what happens, obviously, with Isaac Seumalo after this season and his free agency, and obviously been dealing with some injuries this year. This almost feels like a nod that hey, we're going to go into at least the draft and offseason thinking that we've got a very capable guy in Spencer Anderson to potentially take over that left guard spot.
I wonder if that would end his days as a sixth offensive lineman reporting eligible, or would they still try to continue that? But that's all stuff to talk about down the road.
Yeah, but that's quite. I mean, that's quite. An attaboy pat on the back there. And look,
Yeah.
he's played well. I mean, there's no doubt about it. When in the limited time that Isaac Seumalo has missed this year, to go along with, and I thought one of the more impactful things in Sunday's game was the fact that not only did he start, but they felt confident enough in Andres Pete to come in there and man that left guard spot so that Spencer Anderson could continue, because we did kind of wonder how would that impact the jumbo eligible role and all like that. Obviously, Pete had missed the previous time with the concussion and all like that. So I thought Spencer Anderson had a hell of a damn game
Mhm.
against the Lions in both roles.
Yeah, now this did happen in the Chargers game when Sayamalu missed and then Anderson still flexed out as that sixth offensive lineman and Pete came in for the 8 snaps or so. But it just speaks to how much they value Anderson in that role, that they'll kind of go through all those hoops to jump through of he's at left guard, now he's got to bump out, report eligible. Now Pete comes in once Anderson is done reporting eligible, he's got to sit out a play and then he can go back in. It's a lot of kind of back and forth there, a lot of pieces being moved around, but they see so much value in that package, and rightfully so. The Warren first 45-yard touchdown, toss left to Anderson's side as that sixth offensive lineman, moving people down the line. So, yeah, they really like that package. They really like the guy in Anderson, and certainly not a surprise to hear Tomlin tease about what more he could do in the future as early as next year.
Yep. Yep. So I think that's all I got from Mike Tomlin there, unless
Tomlin,
there's anything
yeah,
else.
he also mentioned about just the road woes against Cleveland. Pittsburgh has lost their last 3 games on the road in Cleveland, just 1 win since 2020, at the Browns, and so being able to combat that and combat a pretty hostile environment. There was a good, um production from Omaha Productions with Peyton Manning and James Harrison about the history of the dog pound. It was mainly about the origins of the practice squad, which were very interesting to learn about, but there was kind of a B story on the dog pound too that was interesting about that history, how that name came to be, and the embracing of the dog pound moniker by Cleveland fans. So definitely a tough place to play, not a friendly confine to Pittsburgh. And if they do have to win this game for the Browns, if the Ravens, do take care of business and beat Green Bay on Saturday, then Pittsburgh will have to win in a place they typically do not win in.
Yeah. I enjoyed the taxi squad history lesson in that. I thought that was very good. I
Yeah,
thought that was one of the better ones that Peyton Manning has done.
yeah, I thought so too. That was really really fun and kind of a cool tie-in with Harrison and Manning and Dog Pound and the whole story there. So
Mhm.
anyway, anything else from Tomlin, Dave?
No, I think we got that
Yeah.
knocked out here.
All right, Dave, let's go to the All-22 review of the Steelers-Lions game, beginning with the Lions offense. What were your more, further evaluations, your takeaways of the All-22 tape?
All right, what side are we starting on?
Offense.
All right, the Steelers offense. I think the fact that they were able to register the, what do we say, 6 explosive plays, despite the fact that they only were 2 of 7 on deep balls, more than 15 yards down the field, coupled with the fact that their third down conversion rate was more than acceptable, and their ability to run the football. I thought those were key components. And look, they didn't have, it wasn't a huge yak game overall, but they're, and really for the lack of a better comment when it comes to the running game, they didn't have to register a lot of yards after contact on a couple of those runs because the running back wasn't touched on a couple of them. They were able to run that wind back a couple of times. They ran it before, I think before the first time that uh Warren broke loose on one of them. They ran it with I believe with Kenneth Gainwell on one of them. I think one of those was Spencer Anderson on the fullback roll on that. And then obviously they had some success on the toss as well too. So the fact that their running game came alive like it did, the fact that they were able to register six explosive plays, 3 of them being 45 yards, and all 3 of those 45 yarders being for touchdowns, combined with the third down element, uh, really was, from a statistical standpoint, and really execution as well too, was a really important aspect of this game. And talking about Spencer Anderson, you look at the communication from, especially on the one from behind the end zone view from behind the play, you can see him communicating that out to the backfield there. There a lot of communication on his side to the backfield about potentially how they're going to block that up and maybe which side they should go. So I thought that stuck out first and foremost. And then we were treated, one thing that really stuck out since our last show. We talked obviously a lot about that deep pass down the field to Kenneth Gainwell, the amazing catch, his wherewithal to get up and walk into the end zone at that point. Man, Aaron Rodgers, and he said it, drew that one up in the sand. You got the NFL Films mic'd up version of him telling Gainwell to motion out and then motion out deeper and run a go in that situation. So Aaron obviously saw something in that situation, and he got that ball out, and Gainwell obviously did the rest despite being interfered with. And the other aspect of this, and we talked quite specifically about this, you did the other day, about all the communication that Aaron Rodgers had with guys like Thielen and I think Scotty Miller and obviously Gainwell of getting guys lined up and maybe checked into a certain aspect of the route or play that allowed them to move the football. Thielen. There's been a lot of talk about Pat Fryermuth's a zone killer, right? Adam Thielen is a zone killer as well too,
Yep.
and I think that not that we didn't maybe identify that ahead of Adam Thielen being signed by this team, but that I think is well known at this point that not only do you have a zone killer in Pat Fryermuth, but you definitely have one in Adam Thielen, and especially combined with the football IQ of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And what does zone killer mean? You understand leverage, you understand coverages, you understand down and distances, you understand the defense you're playing against, both the players and the coordinator, how they like to think, how they act, what they like to call, and how to work yourself open. And that's kind of what I, will put together as that definition of a zone killer. But you got the middle of the field working more with Thielen a couple throws over the middle. You had Fryermuth a little bit over the middle. And so you kind of continue to work that space. But you're right. I mean, the big picture thoughts that I have, early in the game, play action was struggling. You weren't getting some of those explosives. One thing Arthur Smith has to stop doing is play action on that first snap of every single game. He's kind of been running some boots, and I think defenses are catching on pretty quickly. But once you got some of those explosives going, then that really kind of shows you how much it cures an offense when you can get big plays, 45 yards, touchdown 3 times in this game is a really big accomplishment for this unit. But I just thought, as you said, Rodgers and artist at work kind of felt a lot of drawn up kind of stuff. You run this route, you go do this, and you hear that in some of the NFL films clips, which are really fun. And then also to the point, I was listening to McAfee show talk about this. That also speaks to the level of trust that everyone else has in Aaron Rodgers to just, without question, without pause, immediately do whatever he says. Because on that Gainwell touchdown, you had initially, it sounded like Rodgers was telling Gainwell to run into the right flat. And then he said, go motion out all the way out and run a go. And Gainwell just does it without any hesitation. And so guys just have complete and utter belief and trust in this guy, as they should, given Rodgers' talent and his experience and resume. But it also is a two-way street. Rodgers not just telling you what to do, but each guy accepting it and doing it without issue, communication, and just kind of following the plan and trusting that Rodgers is making the right decision.
Yeah, and that probably happens more in games this season than we know. It'd be nice if you got a full a full boom mic. And I've said this several times over the years, even dating back to when Ben played and all. Sometimes how the boom mic picks up conversations between center and quarterback and all like that. Now, obviously, teams probably don't want that released because you don't want too many. But I imagine a lot of them. I mean, you're on the field, you hear it, right? Those kind of things there. But
other teams to be hearing it, though, is the
right,
thing of
right,
future opponents.
right. But I thought that was quite enlightening to have that portion mic'd up of him and what all went through that touchdown to not Metcalf, Gainwell.
And there's only so many quarterbacks that can do it like that. Philip Rivers, the unretired Rivers, is kind of one you hear in the broadcast, the way that he talks, the way that he communicates. Rodgers is cut from that cloth, is from that era. Most quarterbacks today, they're reading off their wristbands. They don't have that sort of, if my headset went out, can I run the offense? Guys like Rodgers and guys like Rivers and guys like Ben, that's how they kind of grew up. It's what they knew, and they can do it. So it's sort of a dying breed in a sense, what Rodgers is able to do, and it's something to appreciate.
Going back real quick, I don't know how much of you watched of that. Did you watch the? I know we both probably taped it because we have it set, but I was watching the Monday night. What do they call that? The playbook version of the game.
That new analytic cast with Luke Kuechly thing?
Yeah, holy
I did not.
cow! That was that good, and I think they've only done that for like 2 games this year, and all. Man, was that great! And Luke Kuechly, was part of that, and he called that pick six in there because Philip Rivers used the same audible that he had used earlier in the game there, and the who was it, D Winters, I think, picked up on it and stepped. Luke Kuechly said right where the ball was going to go there, and I'll be damned if it did. And Winters knew it too, based on the audible. And then Philip Rivers after the game, they have the mic'd up. I know I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but they have Philip Rivers mic'd up after the game, waiting for D Winters after the game and going over him and say, you knew that was coming because of that check or something. And Winters said, yeah, I didn't know. So sometimes you got to be careful with your own language and your own audibles and calls, because defenses can pick up on that stuff, and that's exactly what happened. As knowledgeable as Philip Rivers is and as smart as he is, defenses can pick up on that kind of stuff.
No question. That's why you have to change your verbiage, not just game to game and year to year, but often in game. We're going to have this series, this word will mean this, or we're going to go dummy count where this word means nothing. We're just going to use it to confuse teams. So that is the game within the game. You're consistently looking for ways to gain an edge, and verbiage is a big way to do that. What words mean, deciphering things, and yeah, I mean, if Kuechly, smart as he is, figures it out at home, then certainly the players in the field know it too.
All right, back to the game. Aaron Rodgers, and said this the other day, in full control here. I think since we talked about how much empty that they used in this game. The other interesting aspect still, and even though he attempted 7 passes, I said, of more than 15 air yards down the field, Aaron Rodgers' snap to throw time was 2.46 in this game against the Lions, and that was third quickest in the NFL for week 16 after all was said and done. So still was able to get the football out quick overall. You would have liked to see them complete a couple more passes down the field. Their yards after the catch wasn't as great as it had been at several other times during the season, but the run game certainly helped support that. And the fact that this team was moving the chains on third down played an impact. And obviously outside of the fumble that Darnell Washington had, this team did a fairly good job down in the red zone.
Yeah, the run scheme was varied. They had some chances downfield. Scantling dropped that one. That was a great double move. We talked about use some double moves on Detroit in this game. They've been prone to getting beat and biting on those initial, stems of the route. And Scantling, he's got speed. The hands have been the issue, and he probably could have had 2 in this game, at least had that touchdown. So unfortunate there. But Arthur Smith called a good game. Rodgers got them in the right situations, able to adjust, seeing some more zone in this game than what the Lions' personality had been and reflected throughout most of the season. So Pittsburgh handled that well. The line did a nice job. Cook played well. I thought Fautanu, that snatch and trap, really effective. Zach Frazier, his grip strength is off the charts. That's a guy that I think is a Pro Bowl snub, certainly played at a Pro Bowl level this year. So just a really good job by the O-line.
Yeah, and on that toss run to Warren, man, super great reach block by Andres Pete on that one. And then Zach Frazier, fantastic job turning his guy out. Cook getting enough of his guy, pushing him to the edge. And I think DK Metcalf out there basically getting a two for one on a bad kind of, I guess, crack and replace type situation there. That was what. Look, a couple, more than just the 2 touchdown runs. There were several runs in this game that were blocked up very, very, very well in this one, and that was so good to see. As kind of an exclamation point. And they had to have this running game in this game because of, once again, the passing game down the field not being where you wanted it to be, just 2 of 7 overall, more than 15 yards down the field. And then the yards after the catch, while it was decent, it certainly did not equate to what the Lions had on their side of things. And the 6 explosive plays is something, the fact that 3 of them were double explosive plays and ended in the end zone really was a huge, huge factor in this game.
Yeah, you also just pick on some guys, pick on kind of their weakness, the fish of the week, and to me that was number 12, Thomas Harper, their deep safety, having to play because of all the injuries to Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph being out, and he's a guy that really struggled in this one. Rodgers looked him off on a bender route to Washington early in the game. You had on the first Warren 45-yard touchdown, DK running that bubble. That's Rodgers again adding kind of wrinkles to the play to get Metcalf to bubble out to draw the attention of the deep safety who loses his, last line of defense kind of alley fill there on the second one. Don't know if that was on Harper, the long touchdown by Warren. The corner had some weird motion on that one, coming down pretty hard on Metcalf, him trying to crack Harper, but that's a guy you felt like you attacked pretty confidently and pretty consistently throughout the game. A young guy, I think second-year guy, hasn't played a ton of football. You pick on some of those guys, got Aaron Rodgers out there to kind of toy with a young DB, and Pittsburgh had a lot of success because of it.
Aaron Rodgers spread the ball around. 9 different players caught passes in this game, and he tried to get one to Johnny Smith that I think was broken up in this game as well too. So they were close to getting the football in the hands in the passing game of 10 different players, but managed to at least get it in the hands of 9 different players in this game overall. So yeah, look, I mean, third down, 8 of 16, 50% in this game. That was a huge factor in this. Their average gain per play, which obviously was helped by the 345-yard plays, 6.9 yards per play in this, and man, 230 yards net rushing is nothing to sneeze at.
For sure. All right, flipping over to the defense, Dave, what are your impressions of the All-22 of Pittsburgh's defense?
Uh Obviously shutting down the run game was a huge component of this, and I thought off the edge, Highsmith and Sawyer made some very impactful plays for no gains or tackles for loss. They had the play that you highlighted on Hayward, deep down low on the deep red zone trip was very impactful within that. I thought Joey Porter had an excellent game as far as in coverage and pass breakups go. Uh, the Lions still moved the football. But they had to do it through the air. There were, I think they blitzed around 25% in this game overall. They a couple of times they were able to actually make Goff move off his spot and get him off rhythm. Thought that was played a role as the game went on there, and they were just even though the Steelers were 0 for 3 in the red zone in this game, the Lions were 1 for 4 in the red zone, and one of those obviously was that first deep penetration that they had. They went for it on fourth down, and the one of the 2 stops obviously came on the last play of the game there. So you look at what this, but between the 20s through the passing game, they still gave up some plays. Obviously, the Lions had 6 total explosive plays in this game of 20 yards or longer. But I think you really got to look at what the Steelers were able to do on some key third downs in this game, because the Lions went 6 of 15 overall. And then the fact that the Lions were 1 of 4 in the red zone. Ended up being super impactful, especially when one of those times was the final possession, final play of the game.
And how many of those explosive plays came in the fourth quarter? Because I don't feel like the Lions were getting much early in that game. It sort of was late when Pittsburgh was backing off, playing a little more conservatively, and the Lions really had to start to go, is when they started ripping off some of their big gains.
Their explosive plays were, let's see, fourth quarter was their longest one. The pass short right to Raymond for 27 yards. You know what? I went back and looked at that too. The way they were calling OPI is, yeah, I know you can't think of this in real time, but that was a mesh concept against man in that situation there, and he chose to go under instead of over. If he runs right into the crossing receiver on that, does that get called OPI in that situation? Look, it was a great call. It was a great read by Goff in man situations to run that mesh, and I thought the mesh was run perfectly within that. It's hard to follow that across the field in that situation, and once you get behind in a chase mode, if they complete that, it's usually off to the races, and that was in that situation there. Let's see, you had another fourth quarter one to St. Brown for 24 yards. You had two of them to Jamison Williams. One in the fourth quarter, one early in the second quarter, and St. Brown another one in the second. So let's see, three of them came in the fourth quarter, three of them came in the second quarter as far as their explosive passing game.
All right. I mean, 3 explosive plays in the first 3 quarters was pretty good business for Pittsburgh. I mean, I think they really did not let Detroit do much of anything offensively in the first 3 quarters. It was not until the fourth quarter that the Lions really found any sort of traction, any sort of Lions-like play until they kind of got their butt in gear.
Right, and now they still did pretty good. The Lions did with yards after the catch, particularly I think, in the fourth quarter there. I think the game within the game, and you kind of pointed to this, I think, the other day as well, too, is the fact that the third quarter for the Lions, I mean, there's really nothing to report, right? Because they had the ball one time in the third quarter. They got it at their own 3. They had net yards of -3 in that, and then obviously the safety. And throughout that period, you're getting your defense is resting during getting to rest pretty much all of the third quarter there. So that was kind of the game within the game that I think ended up playing dividends overall, especially when it mattered most in that final red zone situation.
Talk about the end game sequence, the great tackle by Patrick Queen, the clutch plays down there, the stop by Porter at the goal line, because Porter in that moment doesn't know it's OPI. It's a great job there. But I think also about the Chuck Clark play on Tisla, the play before on third down, trying to go up there. And I still think Clark made an impact to help separate that left arm of Tisla from the football that helped influence the incompletion and the drop pass there. So I think Chuck Clark dropped up 10 interceptions in this game before that point, but I think Clark still stayed in the fight and made a big play late in that one that no one really remembers, but that was, I think, a big-time play against the 6'4" opponent. Already caught one combat catch touchdown on Clark and Duggar earlier in the game to make that play. Should not be forgotten either.
Right. Very impactful play by the defensive line, specifically against the run. Benton, Y.A. Black, Harmon, who we've talked about, and obviously both of your outside linebackers. Alex Highsmith, I think you have a great, was it this morning? A great film room on the impactfulness of his play against the run over the last several games.
Yeah, he's just smashing the run, not just in this game, but throughout the last month. Really going back to the Bills game, as bad as that was for the team overall, but certainly since you got the dozen plays of him just completely whooping blocks against the run, beating pullers, spilling runs and kind of building that fence, keeping runs wide, playing stuff from the backside, getting off of blocks, making tackles, reading the defense well or the offense well. So yeah, I mean Highsmith is on just a true heater right now versus the run.
All right, some great snaps by Harmon against Panay Sewell, and they had the interior of that beat up Lions offensive line very, very suspect for a lot of that game, specifically against the run, and obviously in some passing situations as well too. They didn't handle a couple of stunts very well. We talked about Cameron Hayward occupying 3 players on that safety situation there. So yeah, you obviously, and I think someone brought this up during maybe the live stream or an email earlier in the week there. I mean, would you like to see them be able to be a little bit tighter later in the game? Because I think the Lions had 3 drives of their final three drives all had 10 plays, and they had net yards of, let's see, 74, 68, and 64, which was a good chunk of what they had for the game. And 2 of those ends up in touchdowns. And obviously the last one comes down to the last play, where if that's a touchdown, they lose the game, but they got the stop.
Pittsburgh also, very much like the Miami game, dropping a lot of their front 7 guys into coverage. The defensive linemen, the outside linebackers. I'm going to try to write about this for the morning. We're seeing some really high rates that we typically don't see of the outside backers and even defensive linemen dropping into coverage. I know that last goal line stand, you had several instances of that, including on the very last snap. You dropped both defensive linemen. You dropped Benton and Hayward. You only rushed 2, drop 9 in the coverage, which you just don't see very often. But Pittsburgh doing all they can to take away any sort of throwing lane on the goal line there. So I think that was kind of interesting wrinkle. We're seeing Pittsburgh really kind of do some stuff that feels a little more 20 years ago with your linebackers dropping into coverage, your D-line dropping into coverage a lot more than they typically do.
We talked about going into this game about thinking Jared Goff was probably going, the MO on him was he gets the ball out fairly quick overall. He still, got the ball out 2.58 seconds on average there. And I think his passing yards of 364 was a season high for him for a single game. Obviously had the 3 touchdown passes in there. I think one component of this, though, is he had one of his lower, not the lowest, but one of the lowest completion percentages for him on the season. Just 63, I say just 63%, but for him, based on this season, they did a good job of not having him closer to 70% where he's been, I think, for a lot of the season here. So that was good. Obviously, able to sack him 3 times in this game. With not having T.J. Watt, Nick Herbig was a nice component of this win as well too. So this, I think, if you look in totality here, this is kind of a stat book kind of game where you look at the explosive plays, you look at the third downs, and you look at the red zone stops in this game here. I think a lot of that points to that, especially how that fourth quarter went.
Yeah, it's been some great situational football, but the overall takeaway is when you make these teams, whether that's Miami last week or Detroit over the weekend, one-dimensional, very few quarterbacks can go through an entire game one-dimensional and kind of put a team on their back and produce and play winning football. The elite guys, yes, they can. Mahomes in his prime, Josh Allen at his best can. But, and Jared Goff, good quarterback, nothing against him, but it's just hard sledding when you rush for 15 yards. You have no run game. There is no balance. There is no fluidity as an offense. You're punting on fourth down. You're not able to string some third downs together. You're not, able to have any sort of variety in your offense. That's just hard road to win with, no matter the situation. So I think Pittsburgh being able to do that these last 2 games, Miami more so because of game script, Detroit maybe from not having the ball and just kind of their own unwillingness to run the football. But no matter the reason, I think Pittsburgh just making these last 2 teams really one-dimensional has been a big factor.
And look, I don't know I thought Goff played a really good game still.
I mean, by his standards, it wasn't. The first 3 quarters, he was a mess. He was uncomfortable. He was inaccurate. I mean, he was throwing some ducks into the ground, but I mean, he still had a good game, maybe by a lot of quarterback standards. In the box score, fantasy numbers will still look good, but I think he was pretty rough the first 3 quarters.
All right, and obviously the third quarter was just the 3 plays. So
yeah, but one of which was the safety. So you take a safety there in that situation, 2 points in a 5-point win. That doesn't happen. Just Detroit go down, kick a game-tying field goal. We'll never know how all that would have worked out, but 2 points in a 5-point loss, pretty big.
And then obviously you hold that run game once again to 15 yards. You've done something there with those 2 running backs.
Yeah, really special job, even though I think Detroit didn't run the ball enough in this game. And then again, I just go back to Pittsburgh possessing the football. They're playing a level of ball control we've not seen consistently this entire season, not even close. And when you do that, you're keeping some of these high-octane offenses, some of these really good run games from not getting established and not getting going, and that's been huge.
All right. What else? Anything else stick out to you defensive wise?
I think that's about it. Communication was clean. Again, don't take those things for granted. Not a lot of busts. Guys on the same page. You're facing a really talented, very good scheme in Detroit, and you're on the road. Granted, it's easier to communicate when you're the defensive team on the road because the home crowd's quiet for the offense. But still, I think communication has been clean. I don't take that stuff for granted. It's certainly been issues for many seasons now, and so I always appreciate when Pittsburgh communicates well. And as you said, Porter playing great football, super happy with his progression. And then I just, again, tip the cap to Ramsey to play safety, to play nickel, to play anything and everything at a moment's notice. Not easy to do. you trust that guy to do it implicitly, and I want to give him credit for it.
Yeah, we still, it's worth pointing out that Eccles had to leave that game kind of early too, right? So
Yeah, and you had to move him down, Ramsey down, because you really had no other options. You didn't want to play the reporter, obviously, for half a game. So for Ramsey to do that, that's why I still call him defensive MVP, because the way that he's been able to move around and wear all the hats and plug all the holes for this team this year, not many guys can do that. Ramsey's been able to do so.
all right, that's our thoughts on the All-22. Where to from here?
That's all I got, Dave. If you have anything else to get to, feel free. Just some also housekeeping as Quinshon Judkins, he's out for the season, terrible injury. He suffered over the weekend against Buffalo, so Pittsburgh will not see him on Sunday versus Cleveland. We'll talk about that more for the Friday show, I'm sure. But that's all I got, Dave.
How about Kendrick Green? Revenge game.
Yeah, he was signed off the Bills practice squad to Cleveland today. I don't know if he's going to start, if there's a need, if there's injuries or not, but I think it's just as a backup, but that's certainly a footnote going into this game.
All right, and one thing that we've still forgotten to talk about was the coin toss.
Yeah, Cam Hayward mentioned it post game. You can laugh about it now, but Detroit received the opening kickoff. That was not supposed to happen. Supposed to be Pittsburgh's ball to start this thing. And Hayward said he screwed up the coin toss. He was supposed to say receive. He said defer, and Detroit got it to start in the game. So kind of a funny moment, especially in a location where you had the whole Jerome Bettis Thanksgiving coin flip controversy all those years ago.
All right, that was a fun little nugget there. The coordinators speaking today.
Yes, they're just about to speak as of this recording.
All right, and Cam Hayward, I think, spoke. I think today's Aaron Rodgers Day. Today's the first injury report of Week 17 as well. So we'll have all that covered. So I guess without any further ado, we can get to a smattering of emails here, right?
Yep, let's do that and close out today's show.
Bless your heart, you're struggling through this show again.
It's just the cough. I feel fine. It's the cough. It's the last thing. That Highsmith video has so many edits in it, and so it's catching me each time I talk, and my body hates me because I usually I'm fine, and then I start talking and I start coughing. So that's you know how it is. It's always the cough being the last thing to stick with you.
All right, Nick Shuley back in here. He says, Alex and Dave, I was driving into work this morning listening to Monday's show and I heard the news about the tragedy that Jay Morrison and his family are enduring. I got a little choked up. He says, I as a kid who grew up in Greater Cincinnati, Jay was a fixture in my readings of the sports pages of local papers. He spoke at career day at my high school. He wrote about me when I played baseball in high school. He even wrote a feature piece on me when I got to be the Reds ball boy in 2012. Boy, Nick's done quite a bit, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I've run into him a handful of times around town when I lived there, and you simply will not find a nicer person. Just wanted to try and radiate some positivity and goodwill towards him and his family, and hope those who hear this can say a prayer or two for him and his family. That's very nice, Nick. Appreciate you relaying that. And Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, also had a nice little shout out to Jay during his press conference the other day as well, too. Nick's got a question in that. Here's my question. What kind of role do you think Roman Wilson will have with Metcalf being suspended and Calvin Austin being injured? Who becomes the new wide receiver number one? For starters, I don't think really wide receiver one is really worthy of a topic based on the way that Aaron Rodgers spreads this football around. And look, what do you want to label Kenneth Gainwell? Wide receiver what?
Wide receiver one. I mean, he literally is in receptions right now, and he's second in yards. He's got to be second in yards, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely leads the team in receptions, and he's right up there in yards behind DK Metcalf, who, by the way, will finish the season with 850 receiving yards.
All right, it doesn't count because he misses the last two games.
Okay.
If the Will Howard doesn't count from the preseason, then Metcalf, he would have gotten to 900.
I don't know. He was on pace for 940. I did all the math. I think he was on pace for 945, but being on pace and doing it's two different things. I'm just busted.
I bet you that fan is a Dave Plant just to win this 900
No,
yard bet. That bet you that's one of
no,
Dave's friends over there. Do we
no,
have any knowledge on that?
no, no, no. What kind of role do you think Roman Wilson will have with Metcalf being suspended and Calvin Austin being injured? Look, here's the thing: you're going to see Roman Wilson on the field. It's worth no, look, we don't know Calvin Austin's status. Obviously, if you get to Sunday and that game becomes meaningless, I'm not if I'm not playing Calvin Austin much, if any. If that hamstring ain't right. But you have had guys like Adam Thielen and Scotty Miller make an impact in this thing. You have Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think best case scenario is, or not best case, I think a possible scenario is that you get Wilson on the field for, I don't know, 20, 18, 20, 25 snaps. You get him involved in the passing game. You throw the ball to him a couple times and see if he can make some plays. I don't think it's going to be hugely impactful, but I think he will have moments in this game and an opportunity to make a couple of catches and a couple of plays.
Yeah, it sounds about right. It depends. Does the game mean something? Does it not? He probably plays 15 or so snaps, gets a target or two, and that sounds like, you know, sounds right for Wilson in his situation. But we'll see. You never know what happens on a particular play. But to your point, I agree. There is no receiver one with Metcalf out. If there is, it's probably Gainwell as your closest equivalent. The ball just gets spread around, which we talked about. If Metcalf had ever gotten hurt, what is your plan B? It's that you're not running your offense to any one guy. It's just truly spreading the ball all around.
All right, Jason Chadwell writes in cooking. First, want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas, and a safe and Happy New Year. Two quick questions. Not sure if we have enough tape yet to compare Cook to Broderick Jones, but based on sample size, who has played better left tackle this year? What has been the best quality of each? Number two, I sure hope this team doesn't become too confident. What if Tomlin loses the final two games and misses out on the playoffs? I'm afraid the team and fan base believe it's all but a foregone conclusion that they make the postseason. Thank you for everything you guys did this year. The second part first here. I'm not worried about the team being too confident here. Personally, I'm just not. Now, look, we don't know if either of if both or one of these games is going to actually mean anything. It certainly would be very maddening, saddening, whatever, disappointing if the Ravens win out and the Steelers lose out. And obviously losing out would mean losing to the Ravens in the regular season finale and them missing out on the playoffs. Is anything a foregone conclusion at this point? No, it's not. But I mean, damn, if I would have told everybody listening, relax after that Buffalo Bills game, we're going to get a couple of weeks from now and the Steelers are going to have a night. They're going to control their own destiny again. And heck, the week 17 game against the Browns might not even mean a damn thing. All of y'all would have thought I was crazy. And probably with good reason. I'm not even still probably believing that we're talking what we're talking about right now coming out of that Buffalo Bills game. So, I, I'm not worried about this team being too confident. Are you?
I'm not worried about that, but to the point, it is certainly work still to be done. And beating Cleveland in Cleveland's difficult. They have a defense that can make plays. They took Buffalo to the mat last weekend. Baltimore, if Lamar plays and Jordan Love does, and it's Clayton Tune out there, Baltimore's going to have a good advantage in that one. So this thing's not done until it's done. And I think that perspective is certainly still worthwhile.
Right. About this is just another phrased question, I guess, about Cook versus Broderick Jones. Here's the thing: Cook has played very, very good in the 2.5 games that he's played in so far. There's no denying that. Got a tough matchup against the Browns and all like that. I mean, do we want to get into who's played better left tackle at this point still?
Not yet, not yet. I do wonder if Cook does continue to play well rest of the season. Does that impact that fifth-year option decision? I've been pretty relatively confident about it, but I do wonder if that calculation would change at all if this kind of Dylan Cook character emerges out of nowhere as a potential left tackle of the future. But all things to discuss, once the season ends. In terms of best quality, I think Cook, his readiness, kudos to him, but his speed, his athleticism, really good. And then Jones, I think for him, just kind of his focus, his lock-in, buying in, consistency is something he really found this year in his game.
And look, it's worth continue to point out that Aaron Rodgers continues to get this ball out quickly, and look how much empty they used. And yeah, I thought it was still, even though they had, they made a point to put Metcalf over there and Fryermuth over there with some help and all like that. The actual, even though the guy is over there versus the level of help that they gave Cook, it wasn't like you saw, any decleating or any super impactful chips or whatnot, because of that. Look, I think Cook's played extremely well. There's no two ways around it. Mike Tomlin knows it. Everybody knows it.
Mhm.
Cook has played extremely well in the 2.5 games so far. So, as Mike Tomlin says, keep watching, right? And you got obviously a tough one with Myles Garrett, and he's going to get help, like Mike Tomlin said, like the rest of the tackles around the league do with Myles Garrett. So, I keep going back to let's say the worst thing that comes out of this is you secure a guy moving forward in that you have complete confidence to be a swing tackle guy, and you don't blink moving forward.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. And you said Cook's under contract for 26, which means all your tackles are Jones and Fautanu, regardless of option on Jones. He's back in 26, and Cook and Calvin Anderson under contract too. So you're set a tackle, which is something you don't always get to say.
I mean, are they, assuming Cook plays the same level or a little bit better even the remainder of the season? And obviously, we're not expecting, we'll see if Broderick Jones can make it back to the playoffs, yada, yada, and all like that. Do you go into training camp as an open competition, or is it still Broderick Jones' spot?
Well, we'll deal with all that. I think once the season wraps up, we'll see what the fifth year option looks like on Jones. And I just say that to say if they pick up the fifth year option on Jones, then I can't imagine them opening up a competition. If they decline it, then maybe there's a case to be made for a competition there. But as you said, all good problems to have.
Right. Look, this is your fourth tackle, and you're getting very, very good play out of Dylan Cook, and just hope it continues here for the rest of the run. So he's your starting left tackle, though, right?
The rest of the season, yes. There's no questions. Andres Pete even is aware of that, I'm sure.
Yeah. And look, I like Andres Pete. I said this going back to the before the start of the season. I like Andres Pete in that left guard role. I
Yeah,
really
he's
do.
big body. He can move some people.
All right, let's see if we can get another question or two here real quick. I lost my sort there real quick here. Nathan Casey, power poll ponderings. He says, looking at ESPN's power poll that came out Tuesday, the Steelers are number 12. What is heartening to me is that of the 11 teams above them, they have played 6. Only one of those was a win, New England, and the other 5 were losses. Some close, some awful. Looking at that, it actually made me feel much better about the season as a whole. Does it give you guys a different perspective of the season? Also, the way the Steelers are rolling now, isn't it possible the Steelers could beat any one of them or more, especially in Pittsburgh? All right. I love looking at the power rankings just as a means of looking at power rankings. My own power rankings that I use for myself throughout the season, specifically week 7 and beyond, are the adjusted net yards per passing attempt differential. That's to me, there's no greater measure than a power ranking in my eyes than that. I look at them just as fodder, as something to look at, because you got all these major outlets that come out of them. It has not changed my perspective any. Now he does go on to say, look at the play, the teams ahead of them and them playing them and I look, this is a week-to-week business. How are you on the incline? Are you on the decline? The Steelers are obviously a team on the incline right now, and as the last part of this too is about how the Steelers rolling now. Isn't it possible the Steelers could beat any one of, I guess, the 7 teams, of which hopefully they'll be included in the playoffs, especially if they play in Pittsburgh. I think we addressed this either during the live stream or the last. The AFC's wide open right now. You don't have
Mhm.
Kansas City in there. Uh, you know, who is Denver? The Chargers are a beatable team. The Texans, out of the Texas defense is something to definitely be worried about. The Chargers, as I mentioned, I think can be beat. Uh, New England, they got to. They're all bought in over there. They're a damn good team. Buffalo's been up and down throughout the season. I mean, I think we said this the other day. You could make an argument based on the 7 teams in there right now that any 2 of those 7 teams could probably potentially be facing off in the AFC Championship game, and that even includes the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, it's wide open. So, all the top quarterbacks are not going to be in it. Burrow, Lamar, in all likelihood, if Pittsburgh gets in, Baltimore obviously will not be. Um, Mahomes. So, yeah, this thing is just completely wide open. And Pittsburgh's hot, and they're stacking wins, and they're playing good football. And so they are certainly in this thing.
Has your overview of this team changed since the loss to the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, obviously, how could it not? I mean,
Yeah.
you're really playing your best football, so that's what Pittsburgh have been able to find. They've also just found consistency. They've been they were an inconsistent team. You didn't know which team was going to show up on a given week. One against the Colts or the one against the Bengals, first the loss and then the win. Big differences in those 2 games. You guys get the idea. It was a very hot and cold type of team. Now you're seeing this team find more consistency and find some rhythm, and you have a better expectation of what you're going to get on a given week, and that, of course, is big this time of year.
All right, one last one we'll roll through here real quick from Joe Glusco. He's our buddy from York, PA. You may have already answered this on Wednesday's show, but is DK allowed to be in the building and practicing while he is suspended? That's an easy answer there, right, Alex?
Yeah, he cannot. There are some carve-outs for some of these longer suspensions, the 6-game stuff that happens, over off seasons where players can come back like 2 weeks before their suspension, but for something like this, he is not allowed in that building until his suspension is lifted, which I believe is January 5th is the final date on that.
All right, and one interesting to look for there that they're probably, once DK Metcalf comes back from this, they're going to probably get a roster exemption for a
Mhm.
couple of days on top of that. So you have an extra player out there practicing for you. Not that it's a lot, but it's something. So
Yep.
obviously, none of this will matter if the Steelers don't make the postseason. But no, he's not allowed in the building. He's not allowed to practice, and thus there's not going to be a media session with DK Metcalf the next couple of weeks, which is probably, I don't know, good. I don't know. As far as him, just being able to get away and not having to
Yeah.
deal with the media. Number 2, Steeler Nation seems to think we will walk through the Browns. It makes me so nervous hearing all this talk about resting guys when we haven't clinched yet. Are you guys nervous at all that we will be playing Baltimore next week for the division? He says, I think it's certainly plausible that Baltimore can beat Green Bay, and we've struggled in Cleveland the last couple of years. He says, oh, yeah, and now we might be without our top 2 receivers against the best defense in football. I'm not even at that point of worrying right now. Do I want this thing to come down to a winner take all against the Baltimore Ravens in week 18? Absolutely not. This goes back to the question we got. Are we nervous about this team thinking they're too confident? Should they be thinking about potentially resting players? I think we outlined that pretty good in the show that there's no way Mike Tomlin is looking at 90% chance of making the playoffs and working within that. No, this team, up until we know the outcome of the Saturday game between Baltimore and Green Bay, you have to have this team ready to play the Cleveland Browns as if you have to win this game. And what you like, this is a playoff game, technically, for all practical matters there. Now, could his opinion change? Obviously, a decision be made to rest some players after we see what happens Saturday night? Absolutely. But no, that he's going to have this team ready to go out and play the Browns. So no, I'm not nervous.
Yeah, no, they're gonna be ready for this thing. It feel different because that game is on that night before, and so it's not often you kinda can watch and see your fate before you even kick off. If the Ravens were kicking off at the same time as Pittsburgh, 1 o'clock, it may feel a bit different, but yeah, it's certainly a component of it where Pittsburgh may not have to even play this game before knowing their AFC North fate. So that's an interesting wrinkle. But internally inside that building, they're gonna be fine. They're a veteran group. They're not no one's printing out T-shirts yet, so it's all good.
Is it better or worse that they will know or that the Ravens play on Saturday instead of Sunday?
That's good. I mean, you want to be able to rest some guys if you can. Some injured guys you want to be able to bow out. So yeah, you'd rather know that stuff beforehand than during or after.
All right. All right. We got through several questions there. I got to give Alex a little break here. We've got about an hour and 45 minutes in on this show. We will be back on Friday. Still wondering, should we try to at least maybe get Scott in to who covers the Browns, maybe to see if he wants to talk about this game?
If he's free, I know it's a busy time right after the holidays, but sure.
All right. We'll see about trying to get him in, and we'll go over the injury report on Friday. We'll go over the coordinators talk. We'll start previewing this game heavily and looking at the tape of the Browns and Shadur Sanders and everything that goes along with that. So, in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way to get a username and password to take advantage of the ad-free version of the site. Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas Eve to everybody. We will obviously be working, a few of us, on Christmas Day, practice reports and everything along those lines. A couple of the guys will be rotate the schedule out to give them some time off. But hope everybody has a safe and Merry Christmas. And until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.